Hello, everyone, and welcome to our interview on how to study online. Everything you should know about online learning. We are joined today by Mr. Benjamin Bederson, a renowned computer science professor and the Honorary Rector of IT Park University, known otherwise as ITPU. Before we dive into the topic, Ben, could I please ask you to tell us a bit about your background and expertise in the field of computer science and education, please?
Sure. I've been a computer scientist really my whole life, starting even in high school when I was writing some games for an Apple IIe computer. Um, but really, my whole focus has been on designing and building interactive systems. So for about 20 years, I was a professor of computer science at the University of Maryland, where I worked in the Human Computer Interaction Lab. I was perhaps best well known for what I call ZUIs, or zoomable user interfaces. These are the kinds of things you see today on mobile home screens, but when I started that in the late 1990s, there was nothing like it. I've also done a wide range of work in personal information management, photo browsing, digital libraries, mobile user interfaces, and of course, online education. I also co-founded two tech companies. In 2006, I created Zoomobi, a company for mobile advertising. And then in 2014, I created Hazel Analytics, a data company that supports restaurant food chains to manage their food safety by looking at health department data.
Very impressive. Thank you very much, Ben. It would also be great if you could dwell a bit on your expertise in online education and how it has evolved over the years.
Sure. So about 10 years ago, I really started focusing on online education. I worked for almost 5 years at the University of Maryland as an associate provost, helping to guide the university as a whole to think about how better to use technology in their educational practices. And I guess I worked on two major things there. One was to help existing professors, what I call flip their classrooms. That is, instead of using class time to lecture to students, to start recording the lectures or making the content available online so students could really self-study and do some of the content acquisition, reading and learning stuff on their own before they get to class. And we still met on the same schedule, but when students would meet with their faculty, they would already have gone through the material. And so they would spend that time collaboratively working with other students, working on problems together, getting feedback from professors, even meeting with people from industry, doing all kinds of things that were really taking advantage of getting together. The other thing I did was to develop a collaboration with two, what were new companies at the time, Coursera and edX, both companies that helped create what are now known as MOOCs, or massive open online courses. And so the idea there was that the University of Maryland would professors would take some of their courses and put them online through the Coursera and edX platforms and make them available really to the whole world, and offer certificates and eventually support degree programs as well. Actually, sorry, I wanted to say one more thing about my experience at the University of Maryland, which is working in both of these, sort of domains with the professors on campus as well as these online MOOCs, I really came to believe in the importance of hybrid learning. That is, really more like the flipped model, where students can spend some initial time through self-study learning online, but then coming together to be challenged, to do assessments, to collaborate, and really to be motivated by working with other people face to face. It also helped us to help the faculty to really let the students focus on developing their soft skills, what we can think of as communicative or collaborative skills, which are really fundamental to any workplace and often makes the difference between a really successful professional and one that's less successful. Just knowing your technical skills isn't enough if you can't also work with other people, whether they are your colleagues or maybe even clients.
Online education, Ben, being something that has been around for quite a while now, as you prove in your previous response, is nevertheless is still a matter of hot discussions, especially when it comes to these format used in higher educational institutions like IT Park University. A question that bothers a major part of our target audience. What do you think are the benefits of online education compared to those of traditional classroom-based learning?
You know, I have to admit, when I first started thinking about online education, I was a little bit skeptical because I'm a very social person myself, and I really liked the interaction with others. But I came to really see the value of online education, especially in a hybrid environment. And there's really quite a few reasons. The first, perhaps most obvious, is it gives the learner a lot of flexibility. They can work on their own schedule, and they can work at their own speed. Students with less experience might need to repeat information or even pause it and go look up something elsewhere to fill in some gaps. And a more advanced student might watch video at 50%, extra fast or 1.5 times speed, or maybe they skip forward or go outside to get extra information. It also allows students to combine different sources of information. So I just gave some examples of slower or faster students going outside for extra information, but they can also use new tools that are available through other resources. So I had mentioned Coursera and edX. Students can go also learn from them, or they can use, the tools of the day. This month it's ChatGPT. I don't know what it'll be next month. But these new AI tools are really exciting because they offer the ability to help students have a little bit more narrative, a bit more interaction, and the ability to ask detailed questions in a way that they may not be able to with other, existing recorded information. Learning online also lets students learn from anywhere. So ITPU can support students throughout Uzbekistan. And that's really a remarkable opportunity. I do have a couple of other thoughts about the benefits of online learning.
Please do.
It also benefits the instructors. And of course, if we have a better experience for instructors, that's going to benefit our students as well. So many of the things that I just said for students also benefit instructors. Instructors can work at their schedule and from anywhere in the world. And that's really important for us because a lot of our instructors come from other organizations like EPAM, or maybe EPAM engineers will come in and offer, some kind of special, workshop or extra information. And the fact that they can do that from wherever and whenever they're working is really valuable to ITPU students. And the last thing is that it's the reality of the tech world that you as students are going to be learning online throughout your professional career. And so starting to get familiar with doing that today is just going to make it that much easier when you go on.
Exactly. This is, by the way, something that I mention very often when people ask me, why is studying and education online in this university? It's about their ability to continuously work on themselves in the future. Now, let's talk about challenges that students face. I mean, this is something that they have in abundance. They have always had in abundance. But when it comes to changing their education to online format, some of those challenges just disappear, but new ones appear. So, what do you think are some common challenges students face while studying online, and what can we as a university do to overcome them?
Well, I think the biggest issue is that it puts a little bit more responsibility on the student to take responsibility for their own learning. It can seem sometimes that, well, because it's online and everything is available, it's going to be easy. But learning is never easy. Learning is hard. Like it's a basic human thing, which is you got to put some real energy into learning. I used to think that maybe I didn't really think it, but I remember seeing a comic that if you could go to sleep with a book under your pillow, you'd wake up and have learned at least some of the information from the book. But it doesn't work that way. And it's the same thing. You can put up a lecture and on your screen, and then in the window next to it, maybe be watching some Netflix, thinking, well, I'm watching both of them, so maybe I'm a little distracted, but I'm still learning. And no, you're not. You need to really focus. You need to work just as hard as if you were learning face to face. And because the schedule is more up to you, you have to, really decide how you're going to manage that schedule and put in your focus time. So anyway, that is number one. I think the thing that ITPU is doing to help with that is by being upfront about that, number one, and to help students develop schedules, setting deadlines, and then also coming together face-to-face with regularity so that students know they can't, I sometimes think about it, you can't pull the wool over your own eyes. You can't pretend that you're learning because when you show up and you're talking to other people, when you don't know anything because you haven't really been doing your work, it's going to become apparent to you and to everybody else.
Great. Ben, when you met with the ITPU students during your visit to Uzbekistan, everybody was really excited to see some tools that you used, some online tools that you use, and we're taking up on them and integrating them in our education. Can you recommend any specific online tools or resources to students to enhance their learning experience?
Sure. So first of all, ITPU is going to provide really the tools that students that you will need. But as I mentioned, we also encourage you to go outside and take advantage of what's available in the world. I've already mentioned Coursera and edX as places to get freely available online full courses, and there's a lot of information there. Actually, another one is Udacity that's also worth looking at. And of course, there's also ChatGPT, which is really, as I mentioned already, is already available and already quite useful. It needs some care. It is not perfect. It makes tons of errors. And arguably that's good because you can't just use it to do everything for you, because if you try and do that, you're going to have problems. But it's getting better, and you need to, like with all online resources, make your own assessment about what is effective. But what really excites me, as I mentioned, about AI-based chat tools is that you don't just go read some information that someone else has decided what you need, but you can ask your very specific information. And so you ask a general question, it gives you a general answer, and then you can say, well, what about that? Well, I didn't understand this. And it's that kind of online tutoring or online responsiveness that is really helpful. So that is probably the place where I would really recommend. Another place that comes up in Google searches, so you'll find it on your own, but also super useful, is Stack Overflow. That is a question and answer site where humans have answered technical questions, and that tends to be good for getting very specific answers to specific questions. But they tend to have very high quality answers because the QA system has been up for a long time, and if someone gives a bad answer, somebody else will have noticed that and commented on it. So that tends to be much more reliable. So yeah, that's probably a good set of resources to start with.
Great. It really is amazing. It's just unbelievable how greatly these AI-based tools are expanding the horizons of opportunities. It's just mind-blowing. Yeah. And of course, there are been students that differ from one another in terms of their learning styles. And online learning, of course, makes it a bit complicated to address these issues. How do you think online learning be customized to students to suit the needs of individual students with different learning styles?
This is an interesting issue because that used to be the place where we thought that a traditional human classroom was the best solution because it could be interactive and responsive to users. And in fact, that's consistent with the scientific literature on how people learn. Since the 1980s, there has been very good evidence that the best learning experience for a student is effectively a one-to-one tutor, where the instructor can see what the student is struggling with and give them customized, questions and tutorials and lessons to help them really meet them where they are. And that's hard to do in a even face-to-face lecture. If you have, even 20 students, let alone many bigger classes that often exist, it's hard for a professor to spend a lot of time responding to each individual. That just doesn't make sense. And with the historic approaches to online learning, such as the ones I've been mentioning, like online courses such as Coursera and edX and Udacity, those also are fixed and can't adapt to students. And that's where the potential for AI is really much more useful, is that, as I've already said today, students can ask specific questions and the AI tool can respond to that. And I think that's what the value is. It's not so much that it is writing out text and it's doing it in real time. That's fine. You go to Stack Overflow or an online textbook and you can get much of the information that you need. What makes the AI tools useful is that it responds to your specific question.
There was news recently in Uzbekistan blogosphere about ITPU being the first university in Uzbekistan that has integrated ChatGPT in its educational system. And from what I hear from you mentioning AI-based tools being able to solve a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, or helping address those issues, I think we're on the right track. And of course, another most frequent issues that we're engaged in discussions around is assessment. Specifically, the question that we argue around is how do we ensure the quality of education and assessment in an online learning environment? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's several things that we are doing at ITPU. The first is to really focus on developing our courses. And that includes, think of it as three major components: curriculum, content, and assessment. And we put a lot of energy into all three of those. So for curriculum, we are starting by looking at sort of international standards on what the computing professional organizations are describing as being some of the core content to learn. And then we look at that and are heavily informed by that, but we also look at our professional colleagues at EPAM and elsewhere to look at what is really being used today in the profession. So we want to make sure we teach the theoretical underpinnings, the core concepts, but then do that in the context of the actual technologies that are being used today and to continuously update and adapt that. So that's number one, curriculum. Two is the content. So how do we take that curriculum and turn it into specific information? And that comes through our instructors who are really excellent practicing professionals, often with affiliations at EPAM or other software companies where they have a lot of experience in exactly what's going on today, so that you're learning the most up-to-date information. And then finally, assessments. Assessments are valuable in two ways. First of all, students learn really effectively by being tested. It's great to actually do work, but again, the science of pedagogy makes it very clear that if you're actually tested, you're forced to answer specific hard questions, it's a great way to actually learn, because not only does it give you kind of a focus and a deadline and a reason to study, but the act of going through your thoughts and integrating them together to apply them to new questions is a way to sort of to tie all of those bits of knowledge together into deeper thoughts, which then stick with you. But our assessments are not only that kind of formative assessments to help you develop or form your understanding, but they're also summative assessments to really understand what you have learned. And we do that through all of the people that we've been working with our instructors, with our professional colleagues, also our learning experience designers, our professional educators who are experts in developing content and assessments to make sure that we are writing these in clear ways that are assessing the actual curricula that we decided up front were the things that we wanted to make sure we teach. So we put all of these things together, and that's what makes, I think, ITPU work well.
Right. There is a huge difference, Ben, between the old and initial concepts and forms of an online education and the current ones. And you have been at the right time, at the right place, doing the right thing. You were there to see and engage when the whole concept, the initial concept, was being evolved. And of course, it evolves with the technology. You know, the more we have new tools, increasing bandwidth of internet, new software, etc. What about the future? How do you see the future of online education, Ben? And what innovations or trends do you think will emerge?
Well, forgive me if I sound a little bit too self-serving, but I think the future is what ITPU is doing right now. And the reason is that we're actually looking pretty far ahead, and it's pretty different than what is going on at a lot of other places. Actually, pretty different than what's going on at most other places. But if I were to summarize, I would say it has three major characteristics. The first, as I mentioned, is hybrid learning, combination of online and face-to-face. Two, some of that hybrid learning is personalized through the use of modern tools, where, again, ChatGPT is just, today's example, but those tools are continuing to evolve and will always evolve. Three is that while our content, our curriculum, and our assessments are custom and they're kind of, part of our special offering, the reality is that much of the content in the world, especially in computer science, is available online for free. And so it's not just the content that matters, it's how you put this all together, the whole package that adds up to it being valuable. And then maybe a fourth sort of bonus part of the future is that society, whether it's international standards or it's national accreditation, our society as a whole is slowly coming to understand that these different ways of learning are not only allowed, but they're actually exciting and the best ways to do it, because they're both effective at helping students actually learn, but also cost effective, because students can do this at a lower cost, because the reality is much of this online technology scales up well. And so that part is cheaper, or at least can be cheaper. So anyway, I hope that in 10 years, we'll come back and say, wow, ITPU is really an innovator. How do they get this right? And the answer was, well, we had a bunch of really good people working together to, very carefully look at the science of pedagogy, at the technical possibilities, to look at what industry needs, and developing and offering to bring all of those things together.
That's the dream, Ben. That's the dream. I was recently rereading your CV, Ben, and did you know it's a good read? It's a great read. It's just an amazing thing for to read for anyone willing to succeed in this life. Now, you were previously the director of the Human Computer Interaction Lab at the Institute of Advanced Computer Studies and iSchool at the University of Maryland. What are the best some best practices for online learning that you have seen or used during your time at the University of Maryland?
I think the reality is I've already mentioned really most of those today, but in summary, I would say, at Maryland, I called it the flipped classroom. Today, we might call it hybrid learning, but it is moving the content delivery online for self-paced study, and then coming face-to-face for being motivated to work collaboratively, to be challenged, to work on soft skills development. But also for the instructor to not only take advantage of what is well known about the science of pedagogy, but also to build on their own expertise, to bring their own experiences to the table, to make it personal, both to meet the students where they are and to explain, why they know what they know, to make it real for students. One of the biggest challenges that I had at University of Maryland is that it was a traditional teaching organization. Most of the professors and most of the administrators really were not looking forward about this technology to support education in the way that I was. And so even though I had a role to help the university think about the use of technology in learning, there was a lot of resistance, and a lot of professors liked to do things exactly the way they always had done it. I think at ITPU, we have a different situation. It's a new organization. It's a new institution. It's created with this modality of learning baked into its DNA. And so I think in many ways, being the second mover has some real advantages in leapfrogging what were some of more traditional ways of doing things.
Great, thank you very much. Now, Ben, at the university, at IT Park University, students are not really homogeneous in terms of their age. I mean, we have a bunch of students that come to this university from different careers that they already have. And especially for those students, online format of education is quite new, compared to the younger ones who, recognize this as the usual and habitual format of doing pretty much anything these days. I wonder if you have any recommendations on some effective strategies for studying online, especially for students who may be new to this format of education.
A really good question. And you won't be surprised to hear that I have some thoughts on that. The first is what I've already said, which is don't forget that learning is hard. That's true whether it's online or face-to-face, but online learning is a little bit harder, not because there's something bad about online, but because you have to take more responsibility yourself as a student for learning. It's up to you to schedule your time. It's up to you to give yourself an environment where you can focus on the online materials. If you do that, then you can apply what I think are 3 well-known pedagogical tools for effective learning. And they are the following. Number 1, repeated practice. People learn best when they learn things multiple times, revisit things, do it in small chunks, look over and over again. Cramming is not effective. Sure, it might get you through one test, but you're not going to remember it. What's much better is to spend, 30 minutes or an hour a day every single day, rather than saying on Saturdays, I'm going to work for 6 hours. You'll be super more effective if you do it every day. And to be honest, it's a lot easier and more fun. The second is, I already mentioned, assessment is really effective way of learning. Sometimes we call it formative assessments. That is not high stakes testing, but small assessments, small tests to try out your knowledge. So find some online quizzes, or even make yourself flashcards. Or if it's programming, just try some things out and then throw it away and try it again. So give yourself lots of ways of proving to yourself that you really do know things. And the third thing is to help others. It's sometimes unfortunate for the learner if the teacher doesn't know what they're doing, but it's great for the teacher. explaining things to others forces you to articulate exactly what it is you have in mind. And that sort of concretizes the information, and that's really effective. 3 things: repeated practice, 2, formative assessments, and 3, help others. If you do those things in your learning at ITPU, I think it's really likely you're going to be successful.
And I have dozens of questions, but given the time limitations, we will stop abusing you, and we'll of course hope for new interviews to come. It's great to see that we have an honorary rector being a tech-savvy and educational professional. Professional in the sphere of education. I think this is one of the biggest assets. You are one of the biggest assets of this university, and it is with your expertise and support that we will be able to turn IT Park University into the future that you mentioned. We want to thank you not only for the time that you allocated for this interview, Ben, but also for all the support that you are giving to us and your dedication. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Bederson was with us with this interview. I hope that you have obtained much from this discussion, and I hope this interview has taken you at least one step closer to your decision to make IT Park University as your choice number 1. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today, and have a great day.